Okay, so this is session number 14, and we are looking at chapter number 13, Ksetra, Ksetrajina Yoga, the yoga of the field, and the knower of the field. And this is one of the most interesting and very direct chapter, which tells us exactly the relationship between the field and the knower of the field. Now, we may try to understand what is the knower of the field and what is the field. We will see that this is actually a description of our embodied identity and the Supreme Self. And this particular chapter, Bhagwan Sri Krishna gives the guidance of how to go from this embodied identity to the Supreme Self. And not only it is interesting, but it's very clear in terms of directness of the knowledge which it provides. And for people who are really very much kind of practicing the guidance from the Bhagavad Gita, this is one of the most important chapters because it's leading us up to a certain level of attainment in our sadhana. And it becomes important for us to then understand really how this is to be understood and how this is to be practiced. So let's look at what we are going to talk about today. So first of all, as usual, we're going to talk about the logic and the flow of thought so far, and a brief recap of what we have covered so far. The third section of the Bhagavad Gita. Now remember that we are reaching the third section of the Bhagavad Gita because these are the last 6 chapters. And here, the switching of the channel, just like we saw the switching of the channel after 6 chapters, now this is another switching of the channel. And this is according to what I will explain, according to the Mahāvākya, which is that thou art. And it kind of shifts its attention now to the relationship between the human and the divine. So we'll see how that is going to be explained. So first of all, Arjuna is asking the question about Purusa, Prakrti, Ksetra, Ksetrajina, knowledge and the object of knowledge. And these 4 topics, Bhagwan Sri Krishna takes one by one, explains very clearly what these are and how they are related to each other, what is the way of getting to the object of the knowledge, which is nothing but the Supreme Brahman. So in answer to that question, Bhagwan's response is the whole of the chapter, of course. But he starts off by saying a particular verse, which is taken to be the Mahāvākya of the Bhagavad Gita. If you take just this one verse, it will explain to us the whole kind of knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita and its guidance. And we'll see what Bhagwan has to say there. Then Bhagwan explains Ksetra. What is the Ksetra? And in this 4 verses, Bhagwan takes up the description of the Ksetra. Then he tells us about the knowledge. And this knowledge is really the bridge between the individual identity as this ego identity and the Supreme, which is the Ksetrajina, and the Brahman, which we are attaining or trying to attain through our sadhana. Then Bhagwan takes up the understanding of Ksetrajina and the object of knowledge. This is the object of knowledge, and he takes it up as the next topic to be spoken about to Arjuna in his response to the answer to the question which Arjuna has asked. Bhagwan then talks about the relationship between Purusa and Prakrti. So these are different terms which may appear, as if they are talking about different things. But as we will explain, that Bhagwan is talking about Purusa and Prakrti, Ksetra and Ksetrajina, embodiment and Brahman in different kind of ways, talking about the same thing. And how to know the Purush? And the result of knowing Purusha is that we are going to reach a state of complete realization. So this realization which is going to come, how is it going to come? What are the means? What are the practices which we have to follow in order to do that? And Bhagwan explains very clearly here what are the different stages we have to go through in order to reach the final destination. And then, of course, the homework for the next month as to what we need to practice in order to understand and gain a deeper understanding of what Bhagwan is telling us in this chapter. So let's start with the logic and the flow of thought so far and the third section, because we are now moving, as I said, to the final section of the Bhagavad Gita and how this switching of the channel and where does it take us. So again, just to remind ourselves, the first 6 chapters is about the jiva, the human condition, and how Arjuna is suffering in the middle of the battlefield as one of the greatest warriors. He's kind of almost to the point of breaking down and saying, I don't want to fight, and I don't know what to do. In this state of confusion, Bhagwan lifts him up completely into attaining a certain state of the mind, which is now ready and willing to fight. And that, of course, is coming right at the end of the Bhagavad Gita. But the first 6 chapters is really the focus on the not only the source of suffering, but the solution to this suffering. Not solution to the suffering in the middle of the battlefield. Remember, Bhagwan is talking about the solution to all problems. In other words, that he is giving us the solution of all the problems which we encounter in our life in this embodied form. And therefore, the unfolding of this teaching is really what Bhagwan talks about when he starts talking about Sankhya Yoga, Karma Yoga, and how to get established in the highest knowledge, Jnana Yoga. And he goes into much more detail in each of the subsequent chapters from chapter number 2, where he has taken the whole of the Bhagavad Gita and the framework within which he is going to talk about this. Renunciation of action in knowledge, we saw how this is important in terms of our development of purification and renunciation through knowledge, and then through renunciation, how to get into a state of Brahmanishta, which means that we get established in the true knowledge and we become a jnani or an atmavid. And then it gives us the wonderful technique of meditation, which is, one of my favorite chapters as well. It gives us step-by-step how to make this journey, how to go into deeper states of meditation so that we can begin to experience this thing ourselves and get a glimpse of that highest knowledge. So these are the first 6 chapters. And the second 6 chapters actually then focus the attention on how to know the divine. And how to know the divine is about both its manifest and unmanifest aspects, which we then are going to, which we have seen from chapter number 7 right up to chapter number 12, which we saw last month as the yoga of devotion. So one way of looking at it is to say, okay, Bhagwan is actually giving us the knowledge and the experience of the divine right in chapter number 7, Jnana Vijnana Yoga, knowledge and wisdom. This is a switching of channel from the human being to the divine. And here the divine is given in terms of the description of Jnana and Vijnana, but also in the sense of the manifest and the unmanifest Brahman, which we have talked about already, Saguna Brahman, Nirguna Brahman, the imperishable Brahman. And then Bhagwan goes on to elaborate further because Arjuna is asking some questions. He wants to get clarification. And right towards chapter number 11, he says, okay, you have actually given me such a wonderful description. I want to get to know the divine by my direct experience. And Bhagwan, in his compassion, gives him this divine eye, the Divya Chakshu, by which Arjuna can now see the cosmic form of the divine. A wonderful chapter describing to us what we can kind of get a very small glimpse into what Arjuna might have seen. And then the yoga of devotion, whereby Bhagwan now focuses completely on Saguna Bhakti as a complete practice in itself as to how we can practice devotion through the means and the techniques which he gives us in this chapter. And then switching off the channel again, whereby the third set of 6 chapters, now the relationship between the human and the divine, Purusa and Prakrti. Prakriti, as we know, and as we have seen, is the totality of creation. And from the unmanifest, the manifestation takes place because there is this conjunction between Purusha and Prakriti. And out of that comes the explosion of this whole creation, which we are in it and we perceive as this wonderful diversity of names and forms around us. The totality of the whole created universe. And what is the relationship between that and between the divine? And we saw that, we can look at it at 4 different levels, starting from the transcendental, unmanifest Brahman, right up to you and me, who are also expressions of this divinity in one way or the other. The only problem is we don't know about this divinity at all. And some people don't even have a clue as to what this divine is, which is fine. One day they'll get there as well. So chapter 13 is what we're going to talk about today, switching the channel and showing us a very clear relationship between the human and the divine, between the transactional, which we are in at the moment, and the eternal, which is the transcendental Brahman. And then chapter number 14, Bhagwan gives another description of Prakriti and how the 3 gunas play in this Prakriti to give us a changing, dynamic, complex creation, which is can be described in terms of the gunas. Not only that, but again, the relationship with the unchanging. So the changing and the unchanging is what Bhagwan describes in this chapter and also in the subsequent chapters. Chapter number 15, another very important chapter, which gives us an insight into the manifestation of Jiva as related to Purushottama. And this is a chapter which is chanted by many people because it's a short chapter and it's very easy to memorize. And you can chant this chapter, and sometimes it is chanted during when people kind of pass away. And this is one of the chapters which is chanted. Now, the next chapter is again describing the relationship between the ego identity and the divine, and how within each one of us, both these states are possible. And through the choice which we make, we begin to express the divine more and more in our lives by expressing these qualities of the divine states. Chapter 17, the threefold faith. Faith is a fundamental foundation of our spiritual life. Without faith, we cannot get anywhere. And therefore, how this faith has also to be transformed in order for us to know the divine, and how to move from the move more and more towards the sattvic faith, from the tamasic and the rajasic kind of faith. And taking that faith, we move towards the eternal again. This also points out the relationship between the transactional and the eternal. And finally, liberation through renunciation, where Bhagwan is going to kind of summarize the totality of knowledge and guidance. And in this culminating chapter, Arjuna comes to the decision, having gone through this guidance which Bhagwan has given him in the Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna comes to the decision, okay, now I have understood. I am now going to stand up and fight. And this is where the totality of the solution which Bhagwan has given to Arjuna has come into effect, and therefore he is now ready to stand up and fight. So these are the 6 chapters which we are going to take one by one, starting with chapter number 13. So remember that nature of the divine we have talked about, and this is where an overview of what I already talked about, which is the absolute Brahman, Nirguna Brahman, unmanifest Purusha, we can say, imperishable, indefinable, unmanifest, unthinking, unchangeable, and eternal. And what then we can see as Maya, which then creates this kind of, in relationship to Purusha, the 2 powers, which then allow the cosmos to come into being. And at this level, we have got the cosmic Ishvara, which is now the Saguna form, which is beginning to express itself through the powers of Maya. This is the manifest Prakriti, and Vibhuti, one in all, and Vishvarupa, all in one. Again, remember there's a relationship between the cosmic reality as we are experiencing it now and the ultimate unmanifest Purusha. So how is that Purusha manifesting itself in Prakriti in terms of Vibhutis, which is the one in all, in each one of these names and forms which we see, the essence of each and every name and form is this Vibhuti of the Purusha. And Vishvarupa, and this is what Vishvarupa Darshan, which is given to Arjuna in the previous chapter. So one in all in one. This is the manifestation of the unmanifest Purusha at the level of the cosmos. Then the individual avatar, Saguna, again Saguna Brahman, and manifest as Bhagwan, Vishnu, Shiva, Brahma, and these are the Trimurtis, the Trinity of the expression of the highest form, which then becomes available as an individual avatar, which we can worship, we can do puja of, and this is now our relationship to Bhagwan in this name and form. Manifest again from the unmanifest. And of course, personal jiva. This is the Adhyatma. And there is also that relationship between the jiva and the divine. And here the jiva is, as we will see, can relate to the ultimate Purusha or the knower of the field as the doer, the enjoyer, the supporter, the permitter, and the witness. This we will explain a bit later on. But just to keep this picture in mind again, because this is what we are going to discuss as to what is the relationship between Purusha and Prakriti. This is a question Arjuna is going to ask, and how one can actually begin to see and perceive the divine in the transactional. So this is the journey of descent into Prakriti, into humanity as well. And this is our job, is to ascend into the Godhood. So the whole purpose of spirituality is to reverse the flow of this manifestation which has taken place, so that from our manifest identity in this embodied form as the jiva, we begin to ascend into Godhood, into the real self, which is our true nature. So what is the nature of God? As we have seen, according to Brahman, Paraprakriti, with the effect of Maya, we have Ishvara. And this is what I just described just now. And just like we have got the snake and the rope analogy, which shows that the snake is available only because the rope is there. It is sustained by the rope. So also creation is through Brahman, and Brahman is a substratum which then allows this existence of creation itself. Now, what we've got to understand is Maya is really, in a sense, it's a delusion of duality and diversity, because we don't have the right perception. Just like Arjuna didn't have the Divya Chakshu to see this cosmic form, we don't have the eye of discrimination, which allows us to go beyond this duality and diversity. And it comes to an end through discrimination, through our sadhana, when we have the jnana and the vijnana, not only the intellectual understanding, but the direct experience of the truth. And of course, there is nothing higher than Brahman. It is the ultimate reality, the ultimate cause, as we have seen. And if Bhagwan is the highest reality and it pervades everything, how can he be recognized in the perceptible universe? This is a very important principle in the Bhagavad Gita, is that Bhagwan is not there out there somewhere. Bhagwan is here right now with us at this very moment. The only thing is that we've learned to recognize Bhagwan in everything. We learn to recognize Purusha in Prakriti, at the cosmic level, at the level of the avatar, at the level of our own individual identity. This is a wonderful knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita. It does not leave anything in confusion, or it does not leave anything out which is not going to be able to help us to understand it. It is a complete picture of how to recognize divinity here and now. So this is the progression we have seen before. First of all, in chapter number 10, we begin to recognize the one divinity in all the names and forms. Then we come to recognizing everything within this one reality called Ishvara. And then finally, only one reality, which is I am Brahman. This is our terminal point. This is our realization of the truth. Only one reality, I am Brahman. So again, keeping all these things in mind because it is related to what we are going to talk about today. And this will also look familiar because based on Arjun's question at the beginning of chapter number 8 and what Bhagwan talked about right at the end of chapter number 7, he asked about Brahman and he says, Brahman is expressing itself as Adhyatma, sentiency in you and me. Sentiency means what? This awareness, this sense of who we are, and all this functioning of the organs which is taking place through Adideva, control, Adiyajna, function, movement, karma, and Adibhuta, matter. This is the imperishable Nirguna form. This is the perishable Saguna creation. And this is you and me experiencing Brahman in ourselves right now. Because as I control my hand and I control my fingers, what is it which is allowing me to do that? To recognize it's nothing but Brahman. And to see that this thought process which is going on in my mind, this sentiency, this aliveness, this vitality which is there in this body, mind, intellect, where is that coming from? It is an expression of Brahman, movement, this matter, solid gross matter. This is nothing but Brahman. This kind of connection should always be there in our mind so that Bhagwan is not very far away. Brahman is not very far away. We got to recognize this divinity right here, right now. And then let's now look at chapter number 13. So keeping in mind this relationship between the human being, the jiva, and divinity, the eternal transcendental principle of Purusha, and then how this comes into creation. And there is a kind of intertwining of these two principles, which brings about this creation. And then through our sadhana, through our process, we begin to separate them out and to understand that I am not Prakriti. I'm not this body, mind, intellect, but I am that which is the essence of everything, which is a supporter of everything, which is the upadrashta, as we will see, of this which I am aware of. So Arjuna asks the questions and then Bhagwan gives the response. And that is the rest of the chapter. So let's begin with what Arjuna is asking. He says, tell me what Prakriti and Purusha are, the Kshetra and the Kshetrajina, and knowledge, which is the means to knowing the knower of the field, that which ought to be known. What is it that I'm wanting to know? What is the object of knowledge? This, he says, I want to learn all these things which you have. Some of these terms he has mentioned before, but Kshetra, Kshetrajna is what Arjuna is now asking about. And not only the object of knowledge, but the means of getting that knowledge and the distinctions between matter and spirit, the field and the knower of the field. And then Bhagwan gives the response in the rest of the chapter, starting by saying that this body, O Kaunteya, is called the Kshetra. In other words, this body, taken this whole body, and of course Bhagwan kind of dissects it further, saying this is what the body is. This is called the Kshetra. And then he who knows this body, who knows the Kshetra, this field, is called the knower of the field, Kshetrajna. Okay, and this then are the two things which Bhagwan is going to talk and explain to Arjuna what these two terms are. And not only that, but he's going to talk about the relationship between the two and how one gets from one to the other. And he further says that those who know them, the Kshetra and the Kshetrajna, these are the sages. They have talked about this in many different ways, as Bhagwan will explain. So, just to remember, the Kshetra is the body, and the Kshetrajna is the knower of the field, which is nothing but the Purusa. So, here's the Mahāvākya of the Bhagavad Gita, 13, chapter, verse number 3. Know me as the knower of the field in all the fields. This is a definition of Ishvara. So I am that which is the knower of all the fields. All the fields mean each and every moving, unmoving thing in this totality of the created universe. I am the knower of this whole creation. And he says, knowledge of the field is also of the knower of the field. And that is considered by me to be my knowledge. So what does it mean? I am the knower of field in all the fields. The one reality which is supporting the totality of this many things in the creation. Secondly, the knowledge of the field and the knower of the field, which is the changing and the changeless, that is also nothing but me. And then he says, I am the knowledge. I am the ultimate reality. Aham Brahmasmi, as if he is saying this. That's why it's called the Mahāvākya of the Bhagavad Gita. Because he is now talking about the totality of this relationship between not only the created universe and the divine, the matter and spirit, but he also says, I am the ultimate reality. I am Brahman. So you can see, in one verse, Bhagwan is giving this Mahāvākya, this great statement, which is explaining exactly what divinity is. So this is worth actually memorizing this verse, because it will help us in many different situations. Okay, so first of all, let's look at what is the Kshetra and then knowledge itself. So further Bhagwan says what that field is, what is the nature of this field, what are its modifications, whence also it is and who he is and his powers. These hear from me in brief. So Bhagwan, like the master teacher, setting out exactly what he's going to talk about, and then he says, it's not that I'm talking this not in relation to humanity, because rishis themselves have sung about this field and the knower of the field in many different ways. Various distinctive chants and also suggestive words indicative of Brahman. In other words, that there are people who have actually experienced both these things, and they've also chanted and sung and written about it. So, and he says this is full of reason and decision. So the sages have discovered the truth, and they've also talked about the truth by distinctive chants and suggestive words. So let's see what this Kshetra is. And it consists of 24 elements. So starting with the 5 great elements, earth, fire, water, etc. And then egoism, this I-ness, which is part and parcel of what we experience ourselves. The sense of I am this person. This is called egoism or I-ness. Then the intellect, and also the unmanifested, in this case, the vasanas. Vasanas are subliminal inclinations and tendencies which are not manifest, but they start manifesting themselves in the intellect and the mind as thoughts and feelings which come together as desires. Then he talks about the 10 senses. So we don't have 10 senses, but what he means is the organs of action and organs of perception. 5 of each, which make up the 10 senses, and the one mind. So mind is included, intellect is included, ego is included, the unmanifest vasanas are included, the 10 senses are included, and of course the whole thing is made up of Prakriti, which is the 5 great elements, and the 5 objects of the senses. These are also included in the field. So what do we mean by that? We mean the organ of perception is the eye. What it is seeing is the vision. The vision is the object of the sense. So this have to be included in the what is as the Sanghata, as the collection, this congregate of these 24 elements, which then becomes the field. So you can say, what is the field? Field is you and me, because we have all got all these 24 constituents which are available to us. So this is the field, 24 elements consisting of the field. And we can just kind of think of this one entity called this ego identity, this human form, which is consisting of these 24 elements. And that also has something else. So we're given this structure, as it were, but there are also functionalities to this field, which we can think of as desire, hatred, pleasure, pain, aggregate the body, intelligence, and fortitude. So in other words, that whatever is going on in this field, the modifications which are taking place can be described in these categories. And Bhagwan says that in all this, in the field, there will always be some modification which is going on. And for example, in the mind, intellect, there is desire, there's a feeling of hatred, there's pleasure and pain in the body, there's perception which is going on in the body of the pain, there is intelligence, in other words, there's rationality which is available in the intellect, fortitude which is also belonging to the intellect, and so on and so on. So Ksetra has been described, and the modification of the Ksetra has been described. Now, in order to understand this, we don't have to look very far. We can look at ourselves and see all these things are there, not only there, but the modifications are continuously going on. Just like there are modifications going on in your mind. That is nothing but the Ksetra. So going further, this is the Ksetra, 24 elements, and we have spoken about each one of them. And what we have here is Ksetrajina, Brahman. Seem to be very far off. One is here, transcendental, we can't even know about it, we can't even think about it. And here's the Ksetra, which is our embodied experience here and now. What is the connection between the field and the knower of the field? Okay. So here we see that there must be a connection, because this is what Bhagwan has been talking all along, is that Brahman is not very far away, it's not out there somewhere, it is here right now, because it is continuously expressing itself through the creation at all different levels, including you and me. So there is a connection. Now, what is that connection? Bhagwan has said, okay, these elements are there. There are modifications taking place, desire, hatred, pleasure, etc. And through sadhana, we can attain a state of purification. Remember, starting right from chapter number 2, chapter number 3 on Karma Yoga is all about purification. It is all about going from the ego operating system to the Dharma operating system. And as we begin to go on this spiritual journey, more and more purification comes through our sadhana, and it begins to reveal the divinity to us. This is the pathway which Bhagavad Gita follows. In this case, in this chapter, it is this connection between the Kshetra and the Kshetrajna. And therefore, there must be this connection which is available to us through sadhana. Now, what is that sadhana which is going to not only give us purification, but will begin to manifest Brahman in us right here, right now? What is that? Cultivation of the qualities, the means. This is the knowledge which Bhagwan is going to talk about. Remember, chapter number 12, Bhagwan had already given us 36 qualities which we can cultivate in order to bring the divine right into our experience. This is also, Bhagwan is going to give us 20 qualities which we can begin to develop in order to manifest Brahman in our own lives, in our own experience. See how wonderful this knowledge of Bhagavad Gita is. It's not abstract philosophy, it is practical philosophy, living through the Gita. You and I can live through the Gita by following this very practical techniques which Bhagwan is giving us. And in this case, sadhana is about what? In order for us to manifest this divinity is by means of cultivating these qualities, the means, which is the knowledge of the means. So remember this picture. Again, it is something which is going to take us more and more and more towards knowing our true self. So from the Kshetra, which is totally identified with its body, mind, intellect, we want to experience the ultimate reality, which is Brahman, which is my true nature. And the bridge, which is there in between, is our sadhana. It is about cultivation of this quality, the means and the knowledge. So how to know and be the knower of the field in the field. How to be the knower of the field in the field. Whilst I'm just having this experience of this embodied self, how can I know the knower of the field whilst I'm still identified? So Bhagwan starts giving us these 20 qualities. Humility. This is the first one. Humility means what? Giving up the ego and the ego sense of abhiman, that I am this person. And because I'm taking myself to be this ego identity, going in the opposite direction is diminishing the me and the mind, as we have been throughout the previous chapter talking about. The purification is about diminishing again and again this me and mind, and the first thing we have to practice is humility. And it is not about just pretending to be humble, but humility comes from knowing that this is nothing. This ego identity is nothing, because my true nature is the infinite. What is this ego? And therefore I become unpretentious, because having grasped the truth about this, I don't have to kind of pretend to be this, that, and the other. Unpretentiousness, non-injury, ahimsa, then forgiveness, uprightness, service to the teacher. And this is also important. Why service to the teacher? Because teacher is the source of our true knowledge. And therefore serving the teacher by what? By following his guidance. That's the best way we can serve the teacher. Besides, of course, looking after his, needs, besides looking after his welfare, that we are going to be service to the teacher by following his guidance, following his teachings. Then purity, purity of the body, purity of the mind, purity of the intellect. All these are important for us to cultivate and develop. Steadfastness. Becoming steadfast means to employ the intellect in such a way that it becomes a powerful instrument for us to steadily move on the path towards the ultimate. Steadfastness. And then self-control, indifference to the objects of the senses, absence of egoism, perception, reflection upon evils of birth, death, old age, sickness, and their pain. All these are to do with what? They are to do with revealing the divinity within myself by decreasing more and more my attachment to the things of the world, my attachments to myself, this sense of egoism which is there. Bring it down, bring it down, bring it down. By doing what? By cultivating these qualities. So 12 qualities so far, and then going further, non-attachment, non-identification with self, with son, with wife, etc. In other words, my relationship, there is an identification, I and my family, I and my son, I and my wife, etc. Those then begin to diminish as we begin to lower our sense of this identity and attachment to things of the world. Constant even-mindedness, equanimity. This is what we have to go to cultivate again and again, so that whatever challenges are coming up, our mind becomes so resilient, it goes back to its state of evenness. And then unswerving devotion unto me by the yoga of non-separation. By the yoga of non-separation, which means this kind of non-separation between me and the divine. Devotion comes into it as well. It's not just a matter of just intellectual cultivation of certain attitudes and certain mindset and certain ways in which we are going to think about self and the world, bringing the divine right into the equation of our experience, but also devotion to the Lord. And going further, resorting to solitary places. So it means that we have to find time to be with ourselves, and be with ourselves, not with my laptop and with my phone and with this, that, and the other, but just being with myself. Just try that, solitude. Just being with yourself is an exercise in itself. Why? Because it begins to reveal this ego identity to us, because we become much more aware of what's going on in the body, mind, intellect as we stay with ourselves. Distaste for the society of men, which means that our dependency on society of men, our dependency on other people, we begin to kind of roll back and say, actually, I am not going to be defined by my relationship to the world, nor are people going to define me. Distaste seems a bit of a strong word, but this is what Bhagwan wants us to focus on. Constancy in self-knowledge, always contemplating, listening to the knowledge, perception of the end of true knowledge, which means knowing what is the destination which I have to attain. All these are wonderful qualities. And therefore, what do we need to do? How to live through the Gita? Practice cultivating the qualities to know the knower of the field here and now. And how to deal with the ego when it arises, cultivating these qualities for Chitta Shuddhi and Samdarshanam. Remember, purification and evenness of the mind. This is what we are continuously trying to cultivate through following this and cultivating these qualities within ourselves. So memorize all these 5 verses, 13:8 to 13:12 in this chapter. Keep a list of these qualities. You always, so that you can remind yourself of these qualities again and again. Take just 1 or 2 qualities, just like we talked about in the last chapter, a week to focus on, bringing them into your awareness throughout the day, and using the 4 A's method. The conscious living of your spiritual life, and then do this practice and see what difference it makes to you. Because it is only by practicing that we'll realize the truth of the Bhagavad Gita. Without that, it just remains information in our head, which we don't want. We want to live through the Gita. And then remind yourself that you are the knower of the field. And then consciously become the witness of the field, the body, mind, intellect. Okay, so that is the Kshetra. Now let's look at the Kshetrajna and the object of knowledge, which is really the object of knowledge. And here Bhagwan says, I will declare that which is to be known, knowing which one attains immortality. This is the outcome. This is a result of knowing the known, which is, if I know myself as the field of the knower, then immortality. Then breaking away from the cycle of birth and death. And immortality means what? Beginningless supreme Brahman, called neither being nor non-being. So in our transactional world, there is being and non-being. Things come and disappear. But this is even beyond that. In other words, it's beyond creation, beyond the gunas, beyond everything. And it is leading us to the truth about ourselves, which is the supreme Brahman. And with hands and feet everywhere, with eyes everywhere, heads and mouth everywhere, with ears everywhere, all over the place. It doesn't mean that. It means that each one of us is the expression of this supreme Brahman, and therefore we can say hands are everywhere, feet are everywhere. Now this is what Bhagwan is telling Arjuna, is that this is the expression of divinity here and now. Wherever you see ears and hands and feet and everything else, know that Brahman is there. And he says he exists in this world, enveloping all in one in all. Again, giving us this same idea about divinity and how to recognize that in our transactional world. Shining by the functions of all the senses, yet without senses. See how he puts this kind of contradictions as it were between the shining of the function in the senses, but Brahman itself is without senses. This is now the connection, the conjunction between Purusa and Prakriti, the field and the knower of the field. And the knower of the field doesn't have any senses, but it is shining by the functions of all the senses. Unattached, yet supporting all. Devoid of qualities, yet their experiencer. Without and within all beings. The moving and also the unmoving. Because of its subtlety, unknowable. Near and far away. It is that. That is Brahman. This is the Ksetrajina. Remember that it is expressing itself through the body, mind, intellect. It is expressing throughout the creation, and therefore it means that we have to read each one of these verses and contemplate and see what is Bhagwan talking about here when he says shining by the functions of all the senses, yet without the senses. So it is like it says in the Kenopanishad, the eye of the eye, the ear of the ear. It doesn't make sense. And that, sometimes can be very confusing. What do you mean by this eye of the eye and the ear of the ear? This is what it means. It means that something is making the eye to function. What is it which is making the eye to function? Why is it that I can see something? And why is it that things exist in the world? All these are really explaining the conjunction between Purusa and Prakriti and how they come together in you and me to give expression to life, to vitality, to the sentiency, to movement which is taking place, perception, whatever is happening is because of divine being here present right now. Then he says undivided, yet he exists as if divided. So transcendentally, of course, it's undivided. But when it comes to creation, it looks as if everything is divided. That is to be known as a supporter of being, Vishnu. He devours and he generates, Shiva. And he generates because he's Brahma, right? So all the Trimurti is expressed here. He says in creation, Vishnu, Shiva, and Brahma are here and now. And this is nothing but the transcendental expressing itself in the transactional. That Brahman, the light of all lights, is said to be beyond darkness. Knowledge, the object of knowledge, seated in all hearts. Seated in all hearts means at the heart of everything, the essence is the object of knowledge. It is the knowledge, the self-knowledge itself. It is beyond darkness. It is the light of all lights. Light of all lights means what? By which I can perceive everything. So that when I see the light, there is another light which is illuminating this light. It is the light of all lights. And to be reached by knowledge. This is the self-knowledge which we are looking for. Thus the field as well as the knowledge and the knowable have been briefly described. Knowing this, my devotee enters into my being. So Bhagwan is saying, I have explained this to you, and if you know this, and knowing doesn't mean that it is intellectual knowledge, but knowing this means to experience all these things in our lives. It is only that we can enter into Bhagwan's being. And Bhagwan's being is what? Brahman. This is where we have to enter. So the next thing is relation between Purusa and Prakriti. And this is field and the knower of the field expressed in slightly different words. But let's see what Bhagwan says. Know you that matter, Prakriti, and spirit Purusha are both beginningless. Prakriti and Purusha come together, but they are both beginningless without any kind of beginning. And know you also that all modifications and qualities are born of Prakriti. So imagine that these two things have come together. Matter and spirit, Prakriti and Purusha. So there are things which are happening in this conjunction. And what Bhagwan is saying here is that every modification which is taking place, in other words, although it is beginningless, there are things happening in this congregate of the Purusa and Prakriti, whereby modifications are going on and there are qualities which are born. So remember, Purusha is without any qualities, but here with this conjunction, we've got qualities and they are born of Prakriti. Modification qualities come out of Prakriti. And in the production of effect and cause, Prakriti is said to be the cause. So this cause-effect relationship which is there in the transactional world, causality, time and space belong to Prakriti. So Prakriti is a cause of all this cause-effect which is taking place. So if I lift my hand, you can see it. If I put it down, you can't see it. Why? Because this is cause-effect relationship. This can happen only in Prakriti. Prakriti is the cause. In the experience of pleasure and pain, Purusha is said to be the cause. Now, how can Purusha be giving me pleasure and pain? It's not that Purusha is giving me pleasure and pain, but he's allowing the experience of pleasure and pain. In other words, sentiency. Remember, we were talking about sentiency. Sentiency is awareness, and it is awareness of all the things which are going on in my body, mind, intellect, and through my senses, I can perceive the external reality, the transactional reality. Now, where is this awareness coming from? It is coming from Purusha. So this experience which I'm having, the experience itself arises and the awareness of that experience is given to me by Purusha. So Prakriti, Purusha coming together, we've got both these things going on at the same time. Modifications in body, mind, intellect, plus also the experience of all the modifications which are going on. And that is because Purusha is available in myself as what? As awareness. And that gives me the experience of everything which is going on. So Prakriti, cause, effect, modifications in the mind. Purusha, which is awareness and gives me the experience of pleasure and pain. So when they come together, what do we have? We have you and me experiencing all these things which are going on in our body, mind, intellect, and also that perceptions are taking place of the world around me, which is also Prakriti. And Bhagwan says earlier on that these are gunas playing in the gunas. My gunas of the body, mind, intellect playing in the gunas of the world. And if you think about that, I'm none of these things. I'm none of these modifications. I'm none of this cause-effect relationship. I'm not space. I'm not time. I'm beyond all these things. But at the moment, in this embodied form, I'm experiencing all these modifications, experience of pleasure and pain, etc. Through my discrimination and my sadhana, I'm going to begin to disconjunct them. Discrimination basically is about pulling things apart. And this means I'm going to be able to recognize Purusha and I'm going to be recognize what Prakriti is. So Purusha seated in Prakriti experiences qualities born of Prakriti. So this experience is coming of the modifications of Prakriti which is going on. And what happens? Then I become attached to this quality. And when you become attached to these qualities of the gunas, the rajas and the tamas and the sattva, it binds me by me being attached to various different things. So in the next chapter, Bhagwan is going to talk about these qualities in detail. So for example, when I feel lazy, I don't want to do anything, I don't want to know anything, then I enjoy that state of ignorance. That's why I say ignorance is bliss, because tamasic guna playing in me creates this attachment to sleep, laziness, etc., procrastination. When it is rajas, it binds through action. When I feel that action all the time I need to carry out, this is because of the rajasic guna. And the sattvic guna is one of happiness through knowledge. So all of you are listening to this knowledge here, and this makes us to be happy. And this is knowledge, this is the Sattvic Guna expressing itself, and it binds us through happiness. So all these attachments, when they take place, because we are taking ourselves to be this Prakriti, this body, mind, intellect, then what happens? We keep on generating more karma, we generate more vasanas, and then we keep on going round and round the circle of samsara. So Supreme Purusha in the body is called the spectator, it's called the permitter, the supporter, the enjoyer, the great Lord, and the Supreme Self. Now these are now expressions of Purusha who is sitting in the body right now, in you and me. And we can know Purusha in ourselves as what? As all these things. So he who thus knows the Purusha and Prakriti together with the qualities, in whatever condition he may be, he's not born again. So this is what we got to know. We know the Purusha and the Prakriti, able to separate out and say to myself, I'm not none of this Prakriti stuff. I'm actually the Purusha. Off we go. Self-realization, not to be ever born again. We go beyond this cycle of birth and death. So you remember this picture, and I've been talking about sentiency control function earlier on. I showed you this picture. So now, see what Bhagwan is saying and see the consistency and the coherence of the Bhagavad Gita. So like we are having Brahman here, let's put Purusha here for the time being. And Purusha as Paramatma, Supreme Self, as Maheshwara, the Great Lord, as Upadrashta, the Witness, as Anumanta, the Permitter, as Bharta, Supporter, as Bhokta, Enjoyer. So Purusha is expressing itself in this way in which Bhagwan has just explained to us as Paramatma, Maheshwara, Upadrashta, Anumanta, Bharta, and Bhokta. Supreme Self, Great Lord, Witness, Permitter, Supporter, Enjoyer. And this is the Ksetra, this is the Ksetrajina and the Ksetra, and expression in the Jiva. So this Jiva, which you and me are experiencing Purusha when we experience ourselves as Supreme Self right up to the Enjoyer. Now, this is where we get increasingly identified with the Bhokta and the Karta. Remember earlier chapters, that's where we start from. We start off by identifying ourselves as the enjoyer and the doer. And through our Karma Yoga, the enjoyership and the doership begins to go down. This is the process of purification. See the consistency in the whole philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita and the practice. So as we go down and down and down, even when I'm enjoying this food, what is this enjoyer? This enjoyer is nothing but Purusha expressing itself as the Bhokta in myself right now when I'm eating this sweet or chocolate and enjoying the chocolate. I have to make this connection between this experience of enjoyment and the Purusha. And when I get into this identification and forget that I'm the Supreme Self, what happens? Human condition of sorrow and suffering. Bhagavad Gita allows us to reverse this whole flow. How is it going to do that? Let's see. Bhagwan is going to now tell us by means of sadhana, we can know the Ksetrajina Purusha. Meditation, first of all, behold the self in the self by the self. Reminiscent of chapter number 2. Others say by Jnana Yoga, Sankhya Yoga, Karma Yoga. Others not knowing this, worship Bhakti Yoga, having heard it from others. And they too cross beyond death because they are starting off on the journey. So one day they'll reach it. If they would regard what they have heard as their supreme refuge. They've heard something and they say, yes, that is my supreme refuge. So Purusha, and this is what we have seen. And the reverse process is Dhyana Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga. See how wonderful Bhagwan is kind of pointing out to us that this is how you can detect the Purusha here and now. And as we practice more and more of Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and going on to Dhyana Yoga, by meditation, we behold the self in the self by the self. This is the beauty of the Bhagavad Gita, is that it is giving us very clear, precise instruction as how to get to the truth about ourselves and go beyond this suffering ego identity. So, how to live through the Gita again? Reflect on your current practices according to the Gita. Think about how you've been practicing. Reflect about how you can bring the idea of Ksetrajina as present in the moment of your sadhana. Practice having the consciousness of yourself as the Ksetrajina here and now. How? By recognizing what we have talked about just now in every moment, every day. Whether you are just eating something and enjoying, remember the Purusha. It's allowing you to enjoy, giving you the experience of enjoyment. And when you are beholding the self by the self in meditation, the highest practice of meditation allows us a clear glimpse of that wonderful transcendental reality. This can only be done by the means Bhagwan has given us, and again reminding ourselves that I'm not the field, I'm actually the knower of the field. And practice remaining as the witness, the field, witness of the field, the body, mind, intellect. So this is how we can do it. I mean, this is, not complete abstract philosophy. It is something which is absolutely achievable, it is doable, and this is what we got to learn, how to live through the Gita by the techniques and sadhana which Bhagwan is giving us. So what is the result of knowing Ksetra, the Purusha? Wherever any being is born, the unmoving or the moving, know you best of Paratas, that it is from the union of the field and the knower of the field. Remember the two things, conjunction, coming together, matter and spirit coming together, this totality of creation. Know that everything which is perceived or experienced is nothing but a combination of Kshetra and Kshetrajna. This is a very important idea in the Bhagavad Gita, is that Brahman, divinity, is not far away. It's not something which we can't reach. It is here and now. Recognize it. Begin to recognize here and now, in ourselves, in the very nature of our experience. Kshetrajna is here and now. Purusha is present here. And he sees who sees the Supreme Lord existing equally in all beings, the unperishing within the perishing. See the one in all. And indeed, he who sees the same Lord everywhere, equally dwelling, destroys not the self by the self. So self is not going to be destroyed. Why? Because we are looking at the Lord everywhere. He goes to the highest goal. So seeing the one in all and seeing the all in one. These are ideas we have come across again and again, that divinity is here now. Recognize it in the world outside, recognize it within yourself, recognize that everything is contained in this one reality, all in one. So this is the result. The result is what? Is that if I see all this, then I go to the highest goal. And the highest goal is nothing but the ultimate transcendental reality called Brahman. That is nothing but the truth about ourselves. That is the knowledge, that is the self-knowledge, which we are trying to reach out to. And he sees who sees all actions are performed by Prakriti alone, and self is actionlessness. So this actionlessness, which we talked about earlier on, that is when we get to this state of realization that we begin to see none of these things which are actions being performed by Prakriti alone is not me. It's Prakriti going on, doing its job, while I, as the self, remain actionless. when he sees the whole variety of beings as resting in this one divine reality and spreading forth from that one alone, he then becomes Brahman. So, not only recognizing the self in me is the same self everywhere, but that each and every name and form which I'm looking at in my transaction reality, the essence of all these things is nothing but the Brahman. And I can become Brahman when I see the whole variety of beings as resting in this one divine reality called Ishvara, spreading forth from what? From that Brahman, the transcendental reality. Pointing out to us once more, transcendental reality, Brahman, the totality of creation, Ishvara, and then the avatar, and then you and me, and I have to ascend from this ego identity to become Brahman. How? By knowing that the whole variety of everything which is here, resting in the one reality of Ishvara, and then spreading forth from that which is Brahman, recognizing Brahman is the ultimate from which all this variety of beings are coming into being. And when I experience this firsthand, that is when the state of realization is reached. Being without beginning, being devoid of qualities, the Supreme Self, the imperishable, though dwelling in the body, O Kaunteya, neither acts nor is tainted. So Supreme Self remains without any kind of taint, as it were. It is not affected by all this goings on Prakriti. As the all-pervading ether is not tainted, like the space is not tainted by whatever it is containing because of its subtlety. Space is subtle. Whatever is there is the gross objects. So too the self, seated everywhere in the body, is not tainted. This is the existence principle. And here comes the consciousness principle. What is the consciousness principle? Like the sun. So space has been given as an example. Sun is being given as an example. The sun illumines the whole world. So also the Lord of the field, Paramatma, illumines the whole field of Bharata. This is the consciousness principle. So Bhagwan has mentioned all these, both these fundamental principles of the ultimate reality, which is the existence principle, Sat, and consciousness principle, which is Chit. And they who with the eye of wisdom come to know the distinction between field and the knower of the field and of the liberation from Prakriti of the being, they go to the Supreme. So liberation from the Prakriti of being means that I completely disidentify with the body, mind, intellect, get liberated from this identification, and I know the distinction now between what is matter, what is Prakriti, what is consciousness, what is the principle of existence, which is the knower of the field, which is Brahman. When I, through my eye of wisdom, Bhagwan graciously gave Arjuna the eye of wisdom so that he can see the divine reality. For us, the eye of wisdom is what? Is having this Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasanam continuously taking place. Viveka, Vairagya, Shatsampati, Mumukshatva, all the 9 tools of our spiritual toolkit being used moment by moment. And that eye of wisdom which allows us to have this Chitta Shuddhi. And Ramana Maharshi says in Updeshar, he says, Chitta Shodakam Mukti Sadhanam. That Chitta Shuddhi is really the instrument for us to release ourselves from this cycle of birth and death. This is the eye of wisdom. And we can, all of us, attain this eye of wisdom by the sadhana clearly given to us in this chapter and the previous chapters and the following chapters as well by Bhagwan of how to reach the Supreme. to get to a point of complete self-realization. This is what Bhagwan wants all of us to do, right? He wants us to know the supreme truth because that is the ultimate solution to all the problems of human existence. Remember the first 6 chapters and the condition of Arjuna in this state of suffering. He says, you are suffering, but let me give you this wonderful knowledge and the practice of getting to that ultimate destination, and you will escape this ego identity, this identity which is suffering, so that you can attain the supreme and solve the problem of suffering once and for all. So this is what Bhagwan is giving to us in this wonderful chapter, chapter number 13, the field and the knower of the field. So how do I then go and practice all these things? This is a question which you can ask. And this is again reminding ourselves of conscious spiritual living. How is this going to be done? The 4 A's of conscious living: awareness, alertness, attention, action. The 4 B's of learning about how to let go of this ego self by looking at the background, the beliefs, the behavior, and the backwash, the reactions which are taking place. Through that, I can learn about it, about myself and my vasanas and my desires, and let go. Then the 4 C's of commitment to a seeker's life, and that is about what? Clarity, comprehension, conviction, and commitment. And the 4 D's of the attitudes to sadhana and abhyas: determination, devotion, dedication, and discipline. I know I keep on repeating this, but these are fundamental to our spiritual life. And if you get these are so valuable not only in our spiritual life, but in all our transactional life. So what to do now? Homework. Listen, read, reflect, like all the other chapters. Again and again, keep on reading. Chapter number 13, the Yoga of Ksetra and Ksetrajina. Ensure that you clearly understand these concepts which Bhagwan has given to us, and how to discriminate between the field and the knower of the field. Again, prepare another plan to practice the techniques given in this chapter and continue with the practices for the next 1 month. And also remember that whatever we have kind of talked about as practices in the previous chapter, you can also kind of combine together to see what you can, if you can create a plan for the next month. Remember the 20 qualities. These are very important because these are practical things which we can begin to do on a daily basis, and to cultivate each and every quality brings about the rest of the qualities with it. Just practice 2 or 3 of these qualities and see what difference it makes in your state of the mind, your perception of yourself, perception of the world. Things begin to change. This inner transformation will begin to come about simply by following this simple instruction. Develop these qualities, cultivate these qualities within yourself, and each one over time, keep on practicing all the other techniques from the previous chapter, whatever you can practice. Don't give up, just keep on doing these things. And meditation, meditation, meditation every day. If you can do 10, 15, 20 minutes of meditation every day, just grounds you in your spiritual life. I know that personally it has helped me so much over the lots of years I've been following this, and it has every day in the morning when I do my meditation, it just affects the whole of the day because it grounds me in the truth. Enjoy the sadhana, stay safe, stay well, and we will continue with our next chapter, chapter number 14, which is going to talk about the gunas next month.